All right, here we are.
Oh, it's over there too.
Yeah.
I always forget. I feel like he's looking at me then, but I'm still over there.
I don't know, it's like,
Right, yeah.
now we got two up. We can actually throw that one too.
Yeah.
Well, this, I don't know how, this is the time of year where, you know, for me, it gets pretty weird often just because you get a lot of information in the legislature and they've been pretty active this year in education, so there's sort of a lot. So what I thought I'd go over, yes, I don't know why maybe this is on. Is to sort of go over the big things that the legislature did, because that really does, especially this year, will sort of impact on how the budget's sort of built and what we do. There's information on enrollment, and I'm going to give you some numbers on why that's such a big deal. There's been a lot of, I mean, the Coeur d'Alene Press had a big, editorial on everybody got a 10% raise and all this money came, and it's really not accurate. So I'll go over some of that and some other funding that came through on health benefits and stuff, and how the money's going to come through, because a lot of it comes through formula. And then just sort of tell you the next steps of what I'm involved in next month, because now we get close to crunch time as far as really doing the work. So what I first want to talk about was, and I actually put up the legislative intent, because this is a debate that's been going on in the state on how they fund education, for a while. And so this even said it. And so it's not too exciting. So there's a bill called House Bill 723. And we don't read the whole thing, but what it says is that in 1980, the current formula that we use as a state, used average daily attendance. And in 2016, the legislature created a committee, and with recommendations to move to an enrollment-based formula. And that process didn't really change anything. And I actually was at some meetings for it and things like that, because they weren't just going to change. Instead of counting attendance, counting enrollment, they were going to change the whole formula. Well, the moment they started doing that, you sort of get winners and losers. I mean, if you change sort of the way it goes, maybe the formula worked for me better than it worked for you, but now, so I think the state found out, well, this is maybe a bigger conversation, or there's a big impact. They're looking at what other states did. So what they just said was, we require you to both wanted the state to be able to track attendance and enrollment, so at least they had data if at every point they move forward. Well, a couple years goes by and we have the pandemic. And so then, using the same formula that we've always used since 1980, instead of using an attendance number, use an enrollment number, because kids weren't showing up in a traditional fashion. So it was really like a temporary emergency rule. And since we already had enrollment counts, it was easy to just plug a enrollment number in the ADA and it generates your funding. So that was a temporary rule for year one. The second year COVID is another temporary rule. And this law said, okay, well, we'll make enrollment permanent up to July 1st, 2025, with the caveat that we're going to do another interim committee, to really look at enrollment and see what we need to do. So as to go through 2025. And so that law was passed by the legislature. And so here's the fiscal note from the state on what that impact would be, is that they're saying just to go to enrollment and count ADA, it's like for next year, this upcoming year, would be $23 million. In other words, because you have more effectively you know, if you have 100 kids, but they only attend 90% of the time, and you're paying on the 90%, you're paying less money. So since they're paying the 100%, that was the impact, the estimated impact from the State Department saying, well, if you did this, it's roughly $23 million across the state. So they funded it. And they also said, and for this interim committee, that we will fund $100,000 so that the committee can do its work and travel or do however they're going to do it over the next couple of years. So that went to the governor's desk, and effectively would keep the way we've done the last 2 years in COVID with enrollment on the books for a couple of years. And so this is why it's such a big deal. So these are our actual numbers, and I know that it's hard to understand a little bit, but so if you look at the data that we submitted to the state by taking attendance and having enrollment statistics, every district uploads that information to the state on a monthly basis. And so we upload the data, and so for enrollment, our official number for our first reporting period was 4,630 kids. You know, we had like 4,700. The reason is there's some dual credit going on, so we had some partial enrollment and stuff like that. And that generated 237 funding units. And there's a thing called protection, so that is a thing that all the districts, like an insurance program for the state. So I won't get into, anyway, they took a little bit away for our insurance premium in a sense. And so we would have earned 237.54 units. With attendance, so this is the same data, since they're tracking both, I would have had 4,190 average daily count. And my support units go all the way down to, this is why you see the big deal, 214. There's protection that gets into this whole other part of state law. A lot of districts would have been in quote protection, so your premium is higher to protect the people who, the way this formula works. So I really would have been fund for 209 units. I built budget on 213 because I thought it was going to be ADA. So actually that 240, I feel pretty good with that guess anyway.
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty close, like that's considered close, that's right?
Right.
That's
Yeah, within, you don't want to really miss on like the 209, without the protection I would have been right there.
Mm-hmm.
You always want to, if my estimate is 210, I don't mind missing, I don't want to miss two on the bad side,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you
Yeah.
can. So anyway, if you look at the percent, so our attendance on the official attendance enrollment and the snapshot of times when you do it for our first reporting period, we're at 90%. And so how does that result into numbers? And so this next slide's sort of ugly, but we get, so I did this to show so that if we had our funded FTE enrollment in that left column, that first column, you see there's instructional staff, PPS staff is like counselors, pupil personal services, what it stands for, administrators classified, that they're going to fund me 242 teachers. That's how the formula works. So the more kids I have, the more teachers they fund. And for this year, my average dollar, they will give me $49,590 per teacher. So with enrollment, I get 242 teachers. With ADA, I get 214. So I'm down 28 teachers at $50,000. So in enrollment, I'm going to earn $12 million for my teaching staff. With ADA, is going to, 10.6. And so these are the different areas that we get funded. We have instructional staff, pupil services, admin, classified. So obviously, There's just a formula, it's not how much staff we have, it's just sort of how we get our dollars. I have a lot more than 89 classified staff of what they're funding me. So, but when you run it through with the numbers, I mean, it's pretty significant. And so the enrollment funding this year, if they went to ADA funding, the difference in what the state would do is almost $3.1 million. So so this year, we're getting a big bump in state funding because they kept with the enrollment funding. Compared to budget, this number isn't 3.1, it's really 2.3 about. Because my budget was a little bit better than, to go back, my budget was better than this number. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's, but this is just comparing, you know, the enrollment ADA. So my funding per unit, and a lot of times I used $100,000, but a little bit. So we average, if we get a funding unit, when all said and done, about $110,000 a unit. And the other thing that enrollment does is and I'll talk about this later, is there's this discretionary. And these are dollars that aren't tied to staffing. It's just that's supposed to be your funding from the state that's discretionary to do for health benefits. Well, actually, now you have to, but to do for health benefits, to do for your utilities, to do for your paper.
Just anything.
Anything.
Is there anything you
That's
can't
discretionary,
do for?
right? It's supposed to be, no. It used to be truly discretionary, now they're even making discretionary non-discretionary. There's strings attached to everything. But anyway, that's why I guess when we go back to this whole thing, why this law, you know, to get enrollment funding, even if they took the formula, in the long run is going to be better for districts, because just because a kid is absent for 10 days doesn't mean the costs go down. You know, they were sick that day. You still had to teach her all year. Anyway, so that passed the legislature. And so for next year, then Governor Little, he vetoed that bill. And the legislature didn't override it. So, which was actually a big surprise to, you know, a lot of, you know, the Idaho School Boards Association and others who were with the governor. They thought that he would definitely sign it. So now, you know, we are meeting with the State Department saying, okay, how do I build my budget? Is it going to be enrollment funding? Is it going to be ADA funding? Because you can see, do I build a budget assuming another $2-3 million, or do I build a budget? I don't know, right? And so recently, this is like hot off the presses. Here's a temporary. So what the governor said that he would support. But if the state board wanted to extend the temporary rule for another year, he'd be fine with that. Because they actually passed the money, but then he denied the language. So it's very, I don't know what the politics are going on, but there's, so anyway. So we were given this direction literally yesterday from the State Department. Her name is Julie Oberly, and she's the Director of Finance for the State Department of Education down at the state level. And so, you know, all the districts, you know, our business managers, we work closely with them because they're the ones who sort of help us navigate the rules of the road. And so we had a statewide webinar talking about the budget and moving forward with all the business managers with our group. And then she went directly to a meeting with the state board. And so the board plans to act on temporary rule this year and next year, allowing FTE enrollment to be used for funding purposes at this meeting coming up this April. And so they were telling us, build your budget on enrollment based on this rule, assuming that this is going to happen, they're not going to go back. So given that, that is where, I mean, I'm going to build my budget based on the units I think we're going to earn with enrollment. which will generate a higher dollar amount. The challenge with it is that rule, that's going to give us extra money to do things, no doubt. I mean, you saw that $3.1 million or $2 million. I mean, it's a significant bump outside of all the other dollars they were talking about for the state. That's money that's just coming to the district, or would. The question is that going to be an ongoing commitment of the state, or is it going to be temporary? And where that comes into play is that if you negotiate, like if we said, okay, now we have more money and we're going to give a, I don't know, 4%, 5%, whatever raise to, let's say, teaching staff, that's an ongoing cost year after year. And so if you can't rely on it, that's where your concern is, right? So I don't know, that's some things we'll have to talk as we go through negotiations and things like that, how confident we are that this will be a long-term commitment. There's no guarantees from year to year, of course, but generally you try to have stable. So that, I guess, that's just information legislature. But those are like, when we're looking at a school district's finance and budget, that's truly, now we're talking the big ticket items that really impact the majority of our funding. And how that really impacts us is that eventually, if they really were going to commit to this level of funding at the state level, then that's going to allow us at some point at a future date, maybe we don't need to have quite a high as levy because the state's finally kicking in. But you need to have some certainty too. Anyway,
And the increases in salaries, how does that, what's the process with that?
Well,
Is that
right, and that I'm going to show you. So when they talk about increase in salaries, you can see here, and I'm going to go over this a little bit. So here is, we are per teacher, we get, per funded teacher, we get $49,590. Okay, at least,
and it doesn't matter if it's a veteran teacher or a new
No.
teacher, it's just per teacher.
because it's a weighted average, and I'm going to show you how we get that average. So I'm not quite sure where they got, and that's where I'm going to get into. So in here, the fuzzy math on raises. So a lot of people said, there's a 10% raise on teachers. Well, here is how we get paid. So if you're a rookie teacher, this is the career ladder salary schedule for the state of Idaho, and it's very simple. It's randomly. It's this column for this year, and this is for next year. So the career ladder, there's steps within rungs. So the first rung is an R1, R2, R3 called residency. So if you're a teacher out of college, your first year, you're an R1. Boom. And they will give me, for a first year teacher, $40,369. As you work through your first 3 years, this is what the state will provide us as a salary. In order for a teacher to get to the P1 step and get to the next level, that's called professional. It's the professional rung, the P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. They have to have like good evaluations and couple other things to get to the professional. I think they have to take a certain amount of credits, but there's a couple conditions that they have to get to a P1, which very few go R3 and stay at R3 for that year. I mean, it's a pretty seamless step. So then once they become a P1, P2, P3 and keep getting good standing, we keep getting more money on where we place them. So and then finally last year they now have an AP1 and AP2, this is advanced placement. 1, advanced placement 2. Eventually they're going to build out 5 steps. 2 more years are going to have an AP4 next year, an AP5 next year. It's just not, it doesn't exist yet. But they say they're going to do it. They've sort of mapped it out. So now, to be an AP1 teacher, you have to, that's even different. You have to, that was what Becky's been talking about with, they have to, it's based on their evaluation. They have to, they actually have to show student growth, with like test scores or some other measures and stuff like that. So they have to keep a portfolio to get to the AP1. The teacher actually has to show that. So we as a district, if you see like the variance between the 5370 and the 52734, it's a couple $1,000, $2,400 or so. We actually negotiate teachers so that if they get there and they get that, we pass that through. The teacher gets that as a stipend, that dollar amount. So really, I'm not getting any additional funding at that point because I'm just passing it through. I am getting it funding, but it's not like I can take that money then and use it for an overall raise with everybody, right? Mm-hmm. So as we start doing things, we have to back it out. But that's how we get paid.
And this is Lakeland's.
No, this is the state.
Is the state. Okay.
This is the state career ladder. And so this is how, so last year, if you see these columns, our average of all our teachers, when we find an average, was $49,590. And so then they also give us, on that salary-based apportionment, if you're an administrator, they give us $38,777 as a base, and then they have a salary matrix, and if you're a more veteran administrator with more credits, there's a multiplying factor. So our average administrator, when we had that math go through, was about $65,000 of funding. Based off that base. So the raises the state gave on salary schedules, here's 2022-23 levels. It's not a 10% raise of the teachers. It's only, that's what it is. 1%. So that's not 10%. They did give a 7% raise to the formula. So when they give a raise and they say it's 7%, when the state says it, they're saying, well, we give $23,260 for a classified, we gave it 7% more, $24,841. But that's not what I pay a classified person. So it's a raise in funding. It's not a raise in per employee. Well, it's a raise for us, I guess.
It's a raise for the money we get.
It's a raise for the money we get, but it's not a 1-for-1 because they don't fund
They don't wholly fund the positions anyway, so.
Right, so it is more money, so that's, and part of our levy goes to make up that gap of what we pay and what they fund us.
So where's the 10% come from?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
So, now, I don't know.
What?
Sign me up.
Yeah. Yeah, so the 10% might have come through when they also did this.
But don't tell me I'm getting a 10% raise and only give me a 0.92%.
Well, and so, right, but they say that, and then of course everybody says, well, you're getting a 10% raise. Well, no. But they've said that many, many times, and I've always told people, they're just increasing the funding for them, they're not increasing what we pay teachers. It's not so it gets very confusing.
Right, because your average person doesn't understand.
No, and it's way more complex and we probably have to do it, but this is the way Idaho's chosen to do it, so here we are.
Yeah.
What the governor did do, though, is he did take some federal dollars. Oh, this is what I was going to show you. So before I get into that, this is what we pay teachers. Here's our salary schedule, and I know it's a little harder to see. So we pay, first teacher $40,500 is our scale. And as they get credit, this is more of a traditional salary schedule for school districts. This is going to be closer to what most other states do. So obviously, if you're a veteran teacher and you're got your bachelor's plus 60 credits, and you've been with us for 26 years, you're making more than, you know, the 5370. So we have a gap between what we pay where our staff land, and where our staff lands, you know, sort of changes every year, right? A little bit. And for where they are right now, this next slide, this is where our staff are. So I have 22 on step 1, but you know, I have 20 over here.
Oh, wow.
And so we have, you know, quite a few on this BA 60, and so, you know, I didn't go for an average, but we definitely, our average teacher, we get funded 49 for our teacher. You know, our average is closer to about 56. So there's about a $7,000 gap when you know, do the averages. The biggest gap we have is with classified staff, because they're only giving us $23,000 per FTE, and you know, that's $11 an hour
Yeah.
for a full time. And they fund us by, and I get into this later because we'll get into bonus, but you know, classified FTE are considered 260 days a year, 8 hours a day. That's a sort of a work year. That's pretty typical. So 2,080 hours is a full-time person throughout the year. Well, if we have a school admin assistant, she works 8 hours a day, 200 days a year. So she's not, so the state considers her a 0.8. Or even though, you know, she's only a 0.8 from there, but we sort of consider them a full-time employee, because
Full-time
even though they're not
employee,
working the summer, right? So schools they consider teachers who don't work the summer a 1.0 FTE though. So it's sort of, there's two definitions really going on there. But anyway, that is just trying to show you that this whole 10% and all that is all dealing with their salary schedule, their career ladder, and then we pay differently. And there's some districts who follow the career ladder. Some small districts in South Idaho, they just follow it.
They just follow what they
Correct.
don't do more.
They don't do any more, and so, you know, in a sense, if they're within the formula too of sort of how much attendance they have and how much teachers they have on staff, then they might not have a very big gap at all. This is a similar salary schedule to Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls. Lake Pondere is a little bit different. Moscow's pretty similar to this, I know. Lewiston probably too. So it's sort of with our districts in our area, they're more the traditional. So where did some of the other 10% come from? Probably from this law. And this is happening right now. This is fiscal year 2022. And so one thing that they passed, this bill, is it's providing a $1,000 bonus for this school year for teachers, PPS staff, classified staff, and administrators. So all the groups. We have to, it's for all fund sources too. So like if, let's say I have a teacher that's being funded by federal special education, they don't show up on that staffing because they're coming from federal dollars and not state, but it's going to include them too. And they're going to pay retirement costs on top of this. And they're going to do the allocation based on what we reported when we report our staff data on September, effectively the end of September, last September this year. Because that's sort of the data that we support. There's corrections to it, and that they use to generate our payment. And so what part of the 10% I think they're thinking is that they're giving every teacher this, and if their average teacher is a, I don't know, $45,000 statewide. I don't know what it might be. It's 2-3%, maybe right here. How they get to their 10, I'm not quite sure. And the one thing about this is that they're funding us on the FTE on our reports. So the challenge we have is that our classified FTE, that we have, most of our classified aren't a 1.0 FTE, and I was sort of giving my example of the admin assistant. So, but it's been advertised, everybody gets $1,000. But I mean, full. So, we probably are going to try to come as close as we can to this, given that we have the enrollment funding, we have some other things that we'll try to stay within the intent of this the best we can, because we're in a pretty good financial position. But this is the governor, when he gave this, it's important to remember, this is the governor's ARPA State Fiscal Recovery Fund. So, some of the money, I guess, it wasn't really coming from state coffers. It is, I guess, because they gave it to the state, but it really is federal money. And this one, we actually have to process this payment either in April or in May, because we have to make the claim before June 15th.
Oh.
And so June payroll doesn't work because June 28th,
Right,
I'd miss it. So this is actually dollars that if the state didn't use in some way, just, not that they told me this, but you sort of know that it was going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to, payroll right now for us, we're going to try to process these in April because the state's saying, with the crush of all that, please, if you could make your claim quicker.
Please,
Along
yeah.
with making your budget
Budget.
and figuring
So
out how
we'll
to
payroll.
pay
And
your
running the schools.
full-time,
and-
part-time
right.
people.
Right, so we're going to figure that out. We're working on that now because it's just something we need to do.
Mhm.
So those are federal dollars that came to each state, and now the state is allocating it.
Right, and these are federal dollars that came to the state via, sort of to like the governor's office. We also have federal dollars that came through the Department of Education to the State Department of Education. So these are outside of that.
That's different. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are literally discretionary at the governor's. Maybe he could have said, "I want to give $1,000 bonus to police," and he could have
Okay.
done that.
Okay.
But he did it to teachers.
Schools.
Yeah, he did for schools. So I mean, it's nice that I guess those federal dollars are going in. It's a bonus for you people right now. I mean, that's pretty cool. But to say you're getting a 10% raise on a one-time bonus, I mean, this would be like if you're getting a Christmas bonus. Is that really a raise?
Because it's not recurring.
No, it's not
just
recurring.
this
This-
year.
It's a one-time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what when they have the 10%. I can't back any
So
way.
who said 10%?
I don't know.
Newspaper,
Well,
we don't know.
the
newspaper?
newspaper, no, governor, they've been having. I can go.
The governor's office said this too?
Yeah, and there were. I don't know where they got that. Anyway, it come out, but of course now it's been repeated, and it's really just not.
And then like when
accurate.
you're not giving it, then our teachers or our community's gonna.
People
"Why-
are like,
why are you
Right.
not giving
Yeah,
us?"
you're withholding their money. That's the teacher's money. That's
Right.
teacher's 10%.
Exactly.
Gosh, Brian.
Yeah.
Come
I know
on.
we're evil.
I know.
And then here's another thing that they also did. This is before next year. It's very similar. So he then gave another $36 million of, this is the same thing. This is ARPA money. I didn't put that part, but it's federal dollars. Only for our teachers and counselors and those type of staff. And he gave a hard amount. So that is the amount that has been allocated statewide. And so they're going to use this year's data, though, to determine how much we get.
Each school.
Each district.
Yeah.
It's going to be using our F-22 staffing data, and that, based on what that is right now, is estimated to be each teacher, counselor will then be able to get another 1568, sort of 1,568 bonus next year at some point. And then we would have the whole year to determine how we could give them one lump, we could spread it over.
Well, it's kind of nice having at least the knowledge of it ahead of time.
Yeah, so this will be a little easier.
Do a
to-
little bit more planning.
Right, and this will be, well, then we can
Figure
say
out.
when we want to do it, and then this actually, but again, we pay these and then we have to go do a federal drawdown to
To
get
get paid back.
Right.
We
'Cause
pay it up front.
You pay it up front,
Yeah.
so it is federal dollars. But this will be, so maybe they were considering these $2,000 bonuses, or this 15 bonus and that 1,000 plus the 1%, and that's your 10%. It still doesn't add up to 10, but I don't know.
And it's not really a raise.
Is that-
bonus?
it's a
There's
bonus.
difference.
Um,
And this is the 15, or the 1,500 is going directly to the teachers. It's not saying you're getting 1,500 per, right, not per pupil. It's, no, it's made to go to the end unit.
Well, this is,
Teacher.
well, this is, right, this is supposed to go to the teacher. I couldn't give it to like a classified staff or an administrator. 'Cause they'll be reporting on it. But it's also, I'm gonna have a dollar amount. So let's say this year, I have 200 teachers. They're going to give me the 1568 times 200, if that's how many you have. But let's say next year I have 205. Well, now I'm short. So I think it'll be legal for us to then do the math and just make it
Give
15,
everybody a little bit less to make
32.
sure that everybody gets.
Correct. It'll be a little easier than the FTE of the classified,
Mhm.
but
But pupil services aren't some of those.
the counselors,
Those are, yeah, so those are,
that they're included in the number.
okay.
So, but let's say you're a district and you had 200 teachers this year, and you had a little bit, maybe there's declining enrollment where you're at, and you only had 195. You're still gonna get paid on 200 because it's based on this year's data, not on where you are next year. So then they're gonna have a little bit extra. So they could probably pay, $1,650 or something, you know what I mean?
Or 1,600, cause that's a normal flat number. 1568, arbitrary too.
And are the teachers gonna be negotiating a new contract this year?
Every year we negotiate.
Every year you negotiate?
Yeah, every year.
And how do you do that with all of this mess? I mean, that's just gotta be crazy.
Well,
Cause
yeah.
nothing is firm.
Right, so a lot of it is, you do that dance where,
Yeah.
of course, I certainly want, the vast majority of our teachers, it's not the easiest job in the world. They work hard. You can definitely make a living at it. And if you have a dual income, I guess, with your spouse, and it's not too bad. But if you're a starting teacher and you're at, after 5 years, you're at $45,000. You're not. I mean, you can get by, but it's not
And it's getting
not living
harder.
high in the hog. Well, it's definitely
It's
getting harder
getting
now. Yeah.
Well, and that's why so many of them take on additional
Stipends
duties
and
and
dues, yeah.
so that they can get the additional stipends just to make it.
Yeah, for sure. So so in negotiations, I mean, eventually you got to say, the one things I always try to go back to is that we don't want to go backwards. And so that if we put something in, let's try to agree that we want it to be sustainable. And then we can move forward. I'm thinking on some stuff, what we may end up doing is, what we did this year is we said, because we didn't know if it was going to be ADA or enrollment last year either. I actually built budget in ADA, but then they changed the rule. So we had that if like the rule changed and we were financially healthy, that we'd have we knew they were doing the last year a lot of extra time for COVID and trying to do all the online stuff and just even managing that. So we said, well, we'll do you know, sort of a stipend, a one-time payment near the holidays, if it all looks good. We negotiated that so that if things did look not good for the district, we'd say, well, we can't do it. But if it looks okay, then the money, it's not a guarantee, but it's likely. So that's probably how we're gonna approach it this year, is that given these things, maybe we can't promise I can't give you a 10% raise on your base, because then I own that until they leave. But maybe we have to, in state, so just so you know, in state law, and it's, I don't know all the states, but I think it's fairly typical, and it is what it is. A teacher, when they, like in Idaho state law, if I got paid on my main teaching contract $50,000, I cannot make $49,000 the next year. I have to, we actually call it, in a sense, they have property rights on that 50. So if they're in good standing to get a contract next year, the next year has to at least be 50.
So you can't go backwards.
They can't go backwards. Now, obviously, like, I'm not a teacher. I could, if they think I'm doing a bad job. Well, we really don't like you that much, but if you take $10,000 less, we'll keep you. You know. But I mean,
That's ugly.
that's
ugly.
that'd be terrible.
Well.
But you know what I mean. They could legally do that.
But not
As
for
administration,
Yeah.
but to teachers, I can't legally do that. That's what the point I was making.
Yeah.
So, so that we want to make sure that when we agree to something in negotiations, that if their permanent base is going up, that is something we can sustain. And our association actually, negotiations is never fun, but they've been actually pretty reasonable and good about saying, okay, we get some of this stuff, and trying to work with us so we can, you know, have a positive outcome, you know, get the resources going, and you know, meet their needs, because you know, by its very nature, you know, they're gonna negotiations, they're gonna advocate for them, right? That's what they're supposed to do. I get it.
And what
So-
happened last year with the agreement to revisit it in the middle of the year? What happened?
Well, we
with
didn't
that?
revisit, we just agreed that if the numbers were okay, and that, because we're negotiating before we really know where we're gonna end up. Even though this year I know as a district, we're gonna end up in a better financially than we were last year. It's just gonna happen, that's not a bad thing to say. So, but when we weren't sure, we just said, okay, well, and the reason we picked after October is our audit gets done at the end of October. So now we really know everything's flushed out. Now we have and we do that part with the audit too, is that, okay, now we're not gonna wait on Brian's number. Well, let's wait on what the auditor says. And this is really where we're at. And then we said, yeah, we're in good shape and we can do the additional payment. And I think we did, a November and December payment or something like that was part of what we negotiated.
So that was another sort of that bonus concept.
In a sense, yes.
Each, okay.
Yeah.
Was it a flat amount per teacher, or was it a
We did per diem.
percentage?
So we did it based on their daily rate. So a veteran teacher, you know, whatever their sort of per diem rate is. And so we even did it for for classified staff. So yeah, if you're you know, if you're working 8 hours a day and you're a bus driver getting $20 an hour, you know, you're at $160 a day. So if we did 4, that's your daily rate of pay. So we based it. But if you're a new bus driver at $15 an hour, then you got 8 times 50. So yeah, it was, and the reason we did that instead of a flat was to try to, if you give a flat, eventually if you have a large veteran staff, they start complaining a little bit because they're saying the rookie, you know, as a percentage is getting a much bigger bonus. So it does sort of keep the ratio in play. So when we get back into those you know, the employee bonuses and all that, that's really, I think, how, on the raises where we're at, we're gonna have, but because of this enrollment and these, I'm gonna build a budget now more based on this number as opposed to that number. We are gonna have, outside of this, that, that I'm gonna have effectively additional dollars based on last year's budget to be able to do, I'm gonna be able to do an overall raise, but we can't do 10%.
Yeah.
I guess that's the point.
Show me the district that can.
So anyway, I'm going to go over a couple things. Another thing that they did is they funded all day K, sort of.
It's always sort of.
And now, it's sort of, so we've have all day K here through the levy. And we also get this literacy funding, which we help pay for some supplemental materials, and also we cover some like first, second, third grade teachers part of their salaries with these dollars, because it can be for K3. So instead of just funding all day kindergarten, saying, okay, right now in the funding formula, if you have 20 first graders all year, they're a full unit, that 110,000. You have to have 40 kindergartners to get the 110. They only fund you at half for half day K. So all they really need to do if they really wanted to fund all day was to just change the formula and say kindergartners are like first graders. Mm-hmm. But they didn't do that. They went through this literacy funding, which is a separate law. So this is actually my guidance from the state on how to figure out how much money I'm going to get. So I budget $370 per enrolled kindergarten through grade 3 as of the first Friday in November. That's our reporting period. So I'll take, how many kindergartens I think we're going to have, which is going to be around probably 300, and I'll times it by 370. And then budget $480 per student who improved a full tier or who remained proficient on the statewide reading assessment. And if they weren't here for the test, then use this thing. And if they're poor, I shouldn't be so flippant, sorry. If they're economically disadvantaged, so if they're, like a Title I student, or if they're qualify for free and reduced lunch, things like that, then it would be that 480 times 1.75, so almost double. So it's pretty complex, and I'm not quite sure how to estimate the revenues for this. Last year, based on our funding, and it was a different formula for literacy. It was a little similar, but it's different. It was based a $580 amount based on how many kids were not passing who needed help. So it was like a difference. So they've changed the formula. Regardless, so this year, my funding this year for this was almost $400,000. I'm going to estimate, the way I'm estimating it right now, just for budget, it's going to go almost up to 670. So, and it could be more. I don't think it'll be less than that, because this will give us more dollars. But it's, that is how they were funding all full day K, saying, okay, then take these increased money that you'll get through this formula, that you really don't know how much it is, and then you can use that to pay for, if you're only, if you have a half-time teacher, make them full-time, and it's your choice. Or you can take these literacy dollars and just do other literacy things. We could have that choice. I mean, I think we'll use these dollars definitely to fill the gap on full day K, just because we can show that, and then we'll use. So this will free up some levy dollars for other purposes or other things. Mm-hmm. But it's, again, it's, it's just, it just seems a little more
Who
complex than
comes
it has
up
to be.
with this?
And it's
Like,
just-
who has the time to think about this?
And it's only a one-time deal, it's just for next year, this is
Well,
not ongoing. I
Correct,
mean,
but we've had
I-
literacy for the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh.
So we've had, and it's increased each year. So this was sort of one of Governor Little's initiatives when he first came on board, was this literacy funding. So this has been there the last 3. It could, at any time go away, I suppose, but they funded it. It is its own line item. And there were some concerns from the legislature doing all day K, saying, well, then you're mandating, and they didn't want to mandate it.
Oh, right, okay.
But I think you could have just said that we'll fund it if you choose to do it. If you don't choose to do it, you're only going to claim half a kid in. They're not there the whole time anyway. So I don't know. There have been ways they could have got around that, but
Made it a little bit more.
made it a little
Simple.
easier.
Mhm.
And maybe this will get there and it goes well, and because what will happen, because I've seen it, is if a district has the physical room for all day K and they offer it, you have maybe 1 or 2 parents who do not take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's full, it fills up and it's just a done deal.
They all say, a lot of people don't want all day K and all that. Well, I was working at Washougal School District. Well, first I was working when I worked at East Valley School District, just in Washington. We started doing all day K at a few of the buildings, but a parent could opt out, not one, ever. And in Washougal, we did the same thing. We went to all day K with a levy. And the same thing, though, we're concerned about, people are used to half day K, maybe that's what the parent likes. They, maybe they don't think, their child is ready for the whole day and things like that. We had a few of that the first couple months, and then I don't think, literally not one. And part of it is that it comes from the kid too, because even when the kid's only 5, if they're half day K and everybody's all day K and they leave, they're like,
Why am I leaving?
why am I leaving and come back? I
get to stay.
I don't get to stay. Yeah. I think that drives a lot of it, and and you do see actually at that age, they are more ready for really reading in first grade as they get going. It's just the challenge is just keeping momentum through the other grades. Anyway, so that was a good thing. So I mean, when they did say though, and you're in the press, did we get more money, more dollars? I mean, there's no doubt that the legislature and the governor, that in the big picture of just dollars going towards the K-12 system, they did funnel quite a bit of dollars our way.
And are these federal dollars or are they the Idaho surplus dollars? And does it make a difference?
These are, they're not federal dollars, so this is coming from the state.
Okay.
And so, more from like the part of the state when they're collecting sales tax, income tax, that's where it's coming from, and then it's flowing to us. Yeah, so if the state, I don't, ever at some point, said we're not going to do this initiative, maybe it's because they don't, maybe their state revenues are down or something like that. And the last thing I'll talk about, because this is not the most exciting stuff, guys, I know, I'm sorry.
Wait, so you said it frees up some of those levy dollars that we're using currently for all day K, and then you can totally decide how to use that's money then that you move around to other things.
Yeah, so it's sort of in the general fund, and actually we track these literacy dollars in a separate fund, literally from the general fund. So I'll be shifting, I'll take a kindergarten teacher, let's say that they're getting completely funded by the general fund, and let's say they're $50,000 a year. I'll take half of that person for the full day K and charge 25 to these dollars, and then 25 to the general fund. So yeah, that 25 that this year that I charged the whole 50, that's sort of there. So those are some dollars that when we're looking at, if we need to address, like, we're getting killed on, you know, well, I'm sure everybody on staffing for, you know, just trying to keep up with, you know, the cost of what's happening, you know, that we can't control the cost of items and the wages that are going up just in our area, as far as, you know, paraprofessionals who make 14, 15 bucks an hour and might be working with some challenging kids. They might say, well, I can go get some for 14, 15, maybe you don't have the benefits, but it's easier work. So I think that we are gonna have to put some money towards that salary schedule and bump it up. So this is one way where you could, okay, well, this is gonna help with that, right?
Right, without having to.
Without having to do some stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it is a good thing, but I think that's how it's probably gonna get gobbled up mostly, honestly, is looking at those salary schedules for teachers and for the classified staff.
Okay.
And so the other thing that the governor did is they came up and they said they increased our money for health benefits. And so this is how we're funded for health benefits. We're funded. It used to be that we had, and me and Merle went back to this slide, and I said, you know, we had the discretionary of this $29,542 per unit. So in law, current law says you are given $29,542 per support unit. Of that, 16,000, oh, I think I have this, I have these mixed up, I'm sorry. These should be split, that's okay. 16,000, just pretend that this is 21, 22. 16,000 is to be used for discretionary, and 13 is to be used for health benefits per funding unit. Okay, support unit, per person per support unit. Then it goes on to say in law, current law, however, if you don't spend $13,316 in health benefits, you can just spend it on discretionary. So, but that was a change in language. So you knew at some point they're going to change it and say, well, you have to. Okay. Well, this year that actually did come in. So what they did this year is they said, we're going to increase your discretionary from $29,542 to the $35,924. So that's a big bump. But the law said, of that, 16 is discretionary and 19 is health. And so the whole increase is supposed to go to, and that was the dollar amount that they, however they backed into it, would be able to get employees into the state plan of state plan health benefits. It doesn't quite work because, see, we're not, now we're dealing with, again, a formula, not just the staff I have. So I get, per funding unit, 1.55 people. This is the actual formula. So if I have one of my funding units, I get 1.021 of a teacher, 0.079 of a counselor or nurse, 0.3750 of a classified staff, and 0.0750 of an administrator. So 1.55. So if I, you know, we looked at that enrollment number, I'm probably going to budget around 237. They'll fund me 367, so I'm going to have $6,000 extra at 367. That's a chunk of change. But I have more than 367 staff on medical benefits. So, and it was clear that the legislature said, we want this money to go to enhance medical benefits. So, even though I don't know if there's going to be reporting on it, we have no idea. So our discretionary is now becoming really less discretionary. I think the expectation is that, so I'm sure we'll be enhancing our benefit package at the district. Where we'll probably end up going is that we don't pay right now any family, spouse, kids.
No dependents.
So, no dependents. So we have, our health plan right now is, now you can have them on your health plan, of course, but then that's a deduction on you, not a benefit. So right now, we have two main medical plans. We have one we call the driver and one we call the buy-up plan. And so the driver is more of is sort of a base plan, 80%, 20%, a bit of a, I don't know what the overall deductible is, maybe at $1,000, and so it's sort of a base plan. And we will pay if you're earning 30 hours or more a week. So if you're at 30 hours a week, you qualify for medical benefits, and we will pay that cost. That monthly cost plus dental, and so that's if you wanted to just cover you and go to the buy-up plan that has like a low deductible and it's sort of a richer plan, then you're paying the difference between those two plans. If you want to cover your spouse or your kids or dependents, whatever that cost is, either on the buy-up plan, then if to cover a kid is another $200 a month, then that's coming out of your check. So we don't do any covering of families. If you look at Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene, I know Coeur d'Alene does. They have a richer benefit package. So I'm guessing where we'll go with some of this money, we'll figure out how much money we actually will have, is we'll start saying, okay, well, here's the buy-up plan, and if you want to cover benefits, we'll cover up to $250 or something, whatever we could afford. I'm thinking that's how. So a lot of my discretionary, in a sense, is already spent.
Right.
But I think that, and we'll negotiate that, but I think that there'll be, I don't think it's going to be a hard sell. I think that's becoming more important for people. But it was actually, that was sort of a unique Lakeland thing when I came here, is that there was a group of a staff saying that, I was sort of surprised that it was limited and it didn't go beyond when I first came here, but there's some of the way just sort of they have done it, just thought, well, if you decide to have a family, it's on you. So I don't know. Anyway, I do think with some of the extra dollars that's going for this purpose, that was the idea behind the legislation, we should probably do that. So anyway, those are the big things of really what the legislature did, those areas for our revenues. And so now, really, what are the next steps? And for me, really, the work truly begins. We've done already some budget work as far as the nuts and bolts of it, of what I could do, but some of it I have to sort of wait till I get this information. It's too hard to build. So given all those things, like, these units and where people land on the salary schedule and all those things, I'm going to estimate where I think our revenues would be. And even the literacy, I'll come up with this number. I might have to look. That may not be a final, but anyway, it'll probably be around there. And the state may have additional. They have the State Department comes out. They call it the Legislative Roadshow, and they give presentations with maybe some more details and updated information. We go to that, and they'll have some more guidance on some of this stuff, which sort of helps. But I start estimating those revenues for all of our funds, and the general fund's always the hardest. Then I got to really estimate expenditures, and that's really taking our current staff, rolling them over to, if you're on that salary schedule, if you're a step 1 teacher, now you're step 2, figuring out that cost. So,
because they all change every year.
Right.
Everybody, they go to the next step
They go
automatically
up.
by their.
by their hour, and a certain amount of them will move across, and there's money.
Right.
So I just sort of do
You just kinda guess, or do you
Yeah,
actually
no, I
know
guess,
right now?
yeah, you never know.
Okay.
You have no idea, so.
Well, and you don't know what new teachers are gonna come in
Right.
as.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Oh,
because
right.
they may come from another district, so they may have the
They might
years of
not be
experience, and they
Right.
may have, yeah.
And so where, like, I guessed, where was it?
Oh, yeah, that.
This 49, I guessed this was gonna be like 50,500 last year when I did the work. So I was on the wrong side of it, because we actually got less money. Because I thought I would have a few more veteran teachers. And what happened,
Was the last year you got new.
that 22, we've never had 22 on that first step.
Hmm.
So,
That's a lot of
22
new teachers.
yeah,
22 new teachers in this district last year, or this
well,
year.
BA1, yeah.
And why do you think that
Rookie
is?
teachers.
I'm telling you, I think if you were around here and you were close to retirement,
You retired.
after COVID, you just said, I'm done.
Oh.
I guarantee people
Yeah.
were like,
They all retired.
yeah. And so we had, I think things are gonna calm down, but there was more attrition than a typical year. Yeah. And so that's why our weighted average went down. Now, some of our costs went down too, so it's not all bad, but still you're trying to. So we'll do that, and then I do, and often before negotiations are complete, I'll sort of just guess where I think we're gonna be, where we'll settle. I mean, you never know perfect, right?
Cause negotiations are done when?
We just
They're
started.
working on them.
Yeah, we'll just start.
So April.
And so, and there's times where negotiations, if I don't think that'll happen this year, there's a good relationship, but there's times where people don't settle until the next October. And so I mean, that's not unusual. That happened at Lakeland several years ago, where the two sides couldn't agree, and so then you can decide on how you want to move forward. Do you just pay what you paid them last year? Do you want to assume everybody's going to get their step on the salary schedule?
And who's involved with that, and what do you do? You like meeting weekly until you figure it out? Is it?
Not weekly. I
And
think
is
that we
it-
do. We schedule out about 4 or 5 meetings. I'm a part of that. The superintendent, there's 4 or 5 teachers, a couple board members.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that's sort of the group.
And because you have the teachers that are part of the association, but
Correct.
then you have these other teachers that are not. So is it right? Right now is it like is it a few teachers from here and a few teachers here? Is it teachers from each building? Is it how?
Yeah, well, the
Like
teachers the teachers, they try to represent at least, an elementary, a middle school, and a high school.
Okay, so from.
They do try to do that, but we're only negotiating with the Lakeland Education Association. So
Okay.
if someone is not, decided not to join the association,
Mhm.
we're still gonna
It
pay
doesn't
them.
matter. Yeah.
Doesn't matter in that regard, right? And we do have we haven't done a count. There is actually a thing in law that if things got bad, you can say, prove to us that you have more than 50%, that you have representing at least 50% of your teachers. We could actually force them to give us that, but they do. I mean, they definitely have, they don't have 100%, but they have a pretty high percentage of people who are members.
Is your classified staff unionized?
No. Yeah, and that's,
Is that
I don't know of
typical in
any.
Is that Idaho or is
That's
that?
Idaho. And,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I don't know of any Idaho classified staff that are in a union. Maybe they're down in Boise or something that I don't know of. It's, when I worked in Washington, you had unions for the classified staff. So, you're doing sort of the same thing with them and had a collective bargaining agreement. So
And are the teachers, is there like a lawyer that represents them, or is it just the teachers that?
they get support from the Idaho Education Association.
Okay, so they have.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's, oh yeah, in some ways it's, you know, they always say the big district is beating up on those poor teachers. Not necessarily true. Often you have Idaho Education Association with attorneys, with professional negotiators giving them advice against, you know, poor little Wallace school district that, you know, I mean, I'm serious, right? And I'm not that good. You know, I've maybe not been around, you sort of know. But, yeah, they definitely have more, you know, support in that. And they have their strategy sessions planned, and they'll come, they have like a regional rep. One guy, his name used to be Phil, retired, Phil something. Anyway, he's actually a pretty good guy. But he would come to our meetings or negotiations sometimes and sit in. He wouldn't participate, but
You just
he'd
know he
observe.
watches, so then he can advise.
So he
Okay.
can, yeah, he can kind of counsel them.
Right, but
Away from the meetings.
away from the meeting,
Yeah.
but he would see and see how things are going and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
Okay. And then do you rotate board members that sit in on that, or is it like two or three board members, the same ones?
They just,
that-
the same ones
Okay.
for each year.
yeah,
For the
and the
year.
board sort of decides who wants to do it that year, and
Is it like a coveted job or
Oh,
something
I-
nobody wants
no,
to do?
I'd rather be here with you guys.
I
That's all I think so.
would.
Negotiations are not fun.
God bless the 2 board members that volunteered. And they did volunteer.
No, they did volunteer.
They did.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's no drawing names out of a hat.
No, I heard it. I heard they signed up for it.
Mhm.
So no, and so yeah, so for us this year it's Ramona Grissom and Bob Jones, and Ramona was on last year too.
Okay.
So that was her first time,
Okay.
and Bob's a first year board member, so this is.
Yeah.
He's obviously been in negotiations before because he worked for schools, but first time as a trustee.
Yeah.
So it's a
Okay.
little bit different role, but yeah, it's good to have them on there and get their perspective, and good that because the standards are, when we get together and we try to be pretty cordial and say, at the end, if the group is saying, thumbs up, we all think this can go, one of the standards that we look at is one, okay, the teacher negotiating team is supportive or can live with this, but will your membership vote for it? Because sometimes, the
Because
membership
even in the meeting, they still have to take it back to their membership and have their
to
membership
have can
vote
right.
if they agree with.
So
it
we
or
always
not,
say,
so.
do we think,
Everyone, yeah.
will it be ratified by the membership? If it won't be ratified by the membership, then maybe we have more work to do to find something that will be. And you sort of got to trust that they have a pulse on it, right? And I think they're pretty good. And then, but the other standard too is then, okay, also can be ratified by them, but can we also get our 5 board members to approve it? Because they have to approve the final agreement too. And so if the 2 board members are there saying, I'm okay with this, and maybe Bob Jones says, I can live with it, but
But the
Trustee
other
Baines is
don't.
not going to vote,
Yeah.
for who knows, but there could be that dynamic on a board that you would want to, because if you do all that work and take it and then you get a no vote, well then you're right where you're at until you agree. And the last few years that process has been pretty good. So I'll be doing all that estimate that really about the next month. I have about a month to do it. And then when it's all put together, I'll publish a notice of budget hearing with numbers. And it's a terrible form that I have to use, but we publish it in the paper. And
Like the press paper?
oh yeah,
Quarterly
quarterly
press?
press, yeah.
You are legally
law.
required to publish
the
it
legals?
in the
In the legals.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely,
and it's this big form. It's an expensive ad when we do it. But anyway.
And
It's
all the
ridiculous.
school districts do it?
Correct.
And do you rotate per day, or is it all in one?
Well, I have to do it 2 weeks prior to my budget hearing, so I'll do it right around Memorial Day.
Okay.
And so I'll tell the Coeur d'Alene Press, please run it. I have to run it 2 times. Like run it on, this Tuesday and this Tuesday or something like that.
Will it also be available on this district website in case we don't subscribe to the press?
you know, the notice, I don't know if I've ever published that, even though we could, sure.
No, I mean, I could always go buy a paper for that day or whatever,
But yeah, that's true,
Just-
But you would
things are
still need
just
to know what
changing
day
now.
you were
Yeah.
needing to go
Well, if it's in the
purchase,
public
so.
notices, I could go page through the paper that day.
I guess.
I know it's gonna be some, like you said, sometime around Memorial Day.
Yeah, and I could let this group know, but we published the notice of budget hearing. It sort of says, okay, we're gonna have the budget hearing on this date, this time, and it'll be presented. And so at the budget hearing, what are people supposed to, what's the board supposed to expect? So I present, quite a bit of information at the budget hearing. And so the point of a budget hearing honestly isn't for, at that point, for the board or administration to really make changes to what's being presented. There's not time, and even the way the law and the timelines are given, it's obvious they didn't intend for that to be a time to say, well, I don't like that, go back and change it. Well, I can't. We don't have time, guys, because we have to adopt this before,
June 30th.
yeah,
Is that your
June,
fiscal-
June 30th.
Yeah.
So it's not really it's almost adopting the budget, because there is a process later on that if there really is heartburn on the budget, that you can amend and do a second budget,
Yeah.
which is no fun, but you can do it.
So it's a legalese thing.
Right, because the big thing about the budget hearing is to give the idea behind it, and it's, I know they have, Oregon, California, Washington, Idaho, I'm sure Montana does, it's very typical. And cities have to do this. Water districts have to do it, is to give the public a chance to see the numbers and have it presented and be able to ask some questions. Because it's actually a hearing where the public can come up and say, hey, I have a question. It
Okay.
rarely happens.
It's an FYI, it's not a working budget, it's not changes. It's
No,
just-
you're not really doing changes, right? Because we really don't have the time. Now, later on, if we really needed to amend the budget later, there's a process that you can go through. And if you amend the budget, you have to have another budget hearing.
Mhm.
But the budget hearing at that point again wouldn't be to make more changes. It would be to say, what changes have you done?
These are what,
It's
yeah.
what we're doing through whatever work we're doing. So I think it's a time to, to discuss, the information and sort of, where we're spending our money, where we're getting our money, and where we're planning to spend it is really what the budget's showing. And honestly, with our budget, if you remember a couple times we met, we said, what are the priorities? One is we're trying to, maintain consistency of programs. We're trying to maintain staff. Make sure that we keep making some inroads on security and safety, that we keep supporting technology, that we retain quality staff, we keep our small neighborhood schools. And so really the budget's going to reflect that. I mean, we're hiring another armed guard. The budget's going to reflect that we're going to put some more money into staff salaries with the bonuses or with overall raises to try to retain staff. We're going to enhance our health benefits with the dollars they gave us to help retain staff. So a lot of it, the way the dollars are going, there's a lot of technical work to have the numbers report the way the state and the feds require us to report with sort of a complex accounting code structure. But in the big picture, the dollars really are going to support the program and sort of maintain status quo, I guess.
So this budget does not include operations like maintenance? This
Oh,
is-
no, it would.
Okay, so this does include, it's the,
Right.
but the, okay. So all of that, when you have the budget hearing, we will be able to see.
Well, you
how
could,
things are gonna be
yeah.
allocated
Right,
somewhat,
Yeah, I mean, we could,
just wondering.
yes, I usually don't get into every
Okay.
function. So the way if you looked at the document, you could actually see, if you really dug into the back pages of the document, you could see that, so like in the general fund, building maintenance is coded to what they call a function called 664. And within that function, there's like, how many salaries are you paying to 664 for like maintenance workers? So you could actually see, well, last year they budgeted this year they're budgeting that. And so you can make a comparison if you really wanted to get in the weeds of the budget. So it does have that back end data, but on the budget hearing, do I get into that level of detail? No, because we'd be here forever.
Yeah,
More or less, I get into more, well, here, I'll show you.
General numbers, big numbers.
Well, we could actually do this real quick. I'll try not to.
So in April, you're working on this, and then in May, do you bring it to the board at some point? Or do you have different working meetings where they see it? Like
No,
when are-
not too much right now. I mean, if the board wanted to do, I'll update, but, so this is actually the budget hearing. Oh, what am I doing? I don't want to share it with anybody. So this is actually the budget hearing presentation from last year. And so this is that ugly notice that goes in the paper. There's some other things. I'm not going to get too much in this. It's just a terrible thing. But I'll sort of go over some basics of our enrollment and how we generate dollars. And then I'll go, okay, here's the general fund. How much dollars I think we're going to start with. And where we're getting our money from for the general fund. And then where are we spending it? Salaries, benefits, purchase services like our utilities, or like our contract with the school resource officer, things like that. And so within the salaries, when I get into the general fund, part of this is a custodian salary, part of this is a teacher salary. I don't get into that level of minutia because it's broke if you want to. And then, I'm just slow. I'm too impatient. I just get into a few graphs to where our money goes. And then we do have other funds that, like the base program is not supported by any taxpayer dollars. It's all by
participant fees.
by the local, by parents paying. So, but I do say, okay, well, here's the base program, and we think we're gonna, make a little bit of money this year. Actually, I guess I of $8,000, but and there's that literacy. So, I had to estimate like local 295. Well, we got actually more this year. The formula changed, but you never know. And just so some of these, I go over these different funds and just try to explain. And we do give the budget document is available, the whole thing, before the hearing, and part of the notice is if you wanted to actually come in and see it, you could. But that's just sort of the information that's presented. We definitely try to, because really the budget, what's trying to say is where you're getting your money and what areas you're spending it, and we're really looking at, are you spending it on an item, a material supply, are you spending it on a teacher or a salary or a benefit? And for the general fund, the vast majority of our dollars are being spent on salaries and benefits. But even if we went down here to like the debt service fund, so we still have some bonds outstanding that built Twin Lakes Elementary School. So we borrowed money up front to build the school, and now we have to pay back like our mortgage. So this, by law, we have to use this fund for that single purpose. And so we had, some money in the bank and then we're gonna collect that much in property taxes. The state gives us a little bit of money, and then our mortgage payment, there's our principal, there's our interest, and there's our total expenditures, and so we're actually going down. So this 2.4, I'm starting to spend this fund balance down to pretty soon it'll be, in a couple of years it'll be zero and we'll pay off our mortgage. And we're just collecting a little bit less than we need because we have some in the bank. So, I mean, I guess as you go through it, it does sort of show you, you know, well, that's property tax collection, where you spend it and stuff like that through the different funds. But at the hearing, you know, you have to keep it at a certain level of a high level and not get too much in the weeds. You know, if I ever have a community member or if I had a board member who really wanted to get to that level of detail, I'd say, you know, let's just block off a couple hours and we can go over it, because it just, yeah, it's more than really the intent is. But, you know, but through the budget hearing, if you really went through it, if someone wanted to come in and say, well, how much money are they bringing in? Well, it's there. You know, they're bringing in you know, the general fund, you know, plus these other ones. This is last year. They're bringing in $36 million worth of revenue. It's not a little operation, and our intent was to actually spend more than we were going to bring in, was budget. That, my estimate is not on, because we're going to be way above that because of that enrollment revenue. So this whole $26 million in state revenue was based on ADA. Now we got that enrollment, so I got another $2 million that's coming in here. That's why this is going to be, I'm going to be $2 million to the good as opposed to 500,000 to the bad, or maybe even better. I don't know the final number, but and we weren't unhappy with that, because we have the fund reserves where we can go a year and go into the red a little bit. That's fine. It wouldn't have hurt us at all. And at some point we may have to do some of that, where we take some expenditures of one-time funds and address some needs because we have the resources built up.
Yeah, because then people start questioning, well, why are you taking this much if
Correct.
you're not spending it or you don't need it?
Right.
You're just building up a big bank account, and that's
Right. And those levels are all debatable. I mean, right now, our policy says that we should have a fund balance of, we were right there, about 16%. So we're right there. The recommendation from the GFOA, which is a Governmental Finance Officers Association, they recommend that 16 is the bottom, not the top. That's 2%, or that's 2 months of expenditures, is 16%. So if you want to think of, you know, how many months of expenditures a financial planner says you should have for emergencies, they'd say more than 2 months. So the GFOA says that 2 months should be the minimum, and probably 6 as much. I can guarantee you that the Lakeland Education Association would say that 6 months is what they want.
Yeah, they would be astonished by, like, they wouldn't like that, right?
No, because they'd say you have the dollars.
why aren't you? Why aren't
Yeah.
you paying teachers more?
Correct.
And, yeah,
So no,
teachers and staff.
And
Yeah.
the biggest reason for fund balance is for the unexpected and for cash flow. We don't get our money like even. We get like big payments and then months of not getting a whole lot of money, then another big payment. So you want to be able to have enough in the bank to make payroll when you have those low months. Right now we're fine, but when I first came on, we had to borrow to make payroll. So, and you know, and so you borrow the money and you got like a short-term loan, effectively, to bridge the gap until you're getting your big state payment because you just didn't have the cash flow.
And that's late spring. When is that? When's
The
biggest
lowest-
time where you don't get?
The lowest for us is July.
Okay.
June-
Yeah, because you're
June.
still paying teachers over summer.
Yeah,
So
June,
then-
July, you
okay.
get right, that's the lowest because you get, property taxes are paid in June, they're processed in the county gets them, and the county has to do their work and just, they distribute them, you know, end of July, early August, depending. And so you're waiting for that property tax payment, and the state gives you a big payment, a July payment. So that's getting through June and July payroll is when your finances are the lowest. Yeah, there's time of the years we look great with fund night. I mean, it's like
Yeah, when those big
when those payments come through, yeah,
December
in December and things like that, yeah.
Or I guess January.
Yeah, but you know that it'll slide down. Anyway, that's sort of the budget hearing. So, you know, a lot of times people will think, well, we'll go to the budget hearing and we're going to have them change it. Well, you really can't at that point because the timeline's really set by the state. So I don't think that's really the intent of the state. They wanted the board to be able to have the opportunity for the public to come if they wanted. And then they gave a process in law that if the budget does need to be modified later, that you can go through that process. But anyway.
And this is the place for questions, or
Right.
if somebody really wanted to make changes. That's why the board wanted to give an opportunity for anybody to be involved in the budget process, to affect those changes if that they felt that was necessary.
Because I think that I can't remember which one we did it on. Was it the first one? This one?
It just doesn't want to listen to you.
I mean, this is sort of the timeline, as we sort of go through things, that we shared before. And so I'm right here. And that's sort of because the state funding finally came through, and then we had that budget hearing and approval. But really, this is sort of what the district's been doing the last few years. We trying to maintain schools that are not super big. The security and safety has been a big push, especially with the Armed Guard program and also with the school resource officers. And then we've done some things at the building levels with the buzz-in systems, a few more cameras. We put safety film on all the windows on the outside as a project, which is so, hopefully nothing happens, but if someone shot through a window, it actually stops a bullet. So we, trying to keep our staff, and that's always been really a challenge. If we do have programs and we start them, let's say we start FFA up at Timberlake High School, once we start that, we don't want to not have it 3 years from now, right? So, and that wasn't there a few years ago, so once we get it going, we want to be able to make sure that that's something we can continue. Technology's been a big focus, and it did help us with COVID when we actually were close to the one-to-one initiative that we could have all the Chromebooks for the kids, and we were getting close that we had started working on that. And facilities have been a priority, and really for us on the facility side, that's really a lot of it's been repairing roofs, and we're getting near the end of that, and we're moving forward. So the budget in the big picture, there's a lot of detail in the numbers eventually, but really that's sort of where our money's going. And it should reflect that. The extracurricular activities, that's a big part of our levy. But that's important definitely for the community. I think that's been a big thing, so we wanted to be able to support that and make sure that you don't have to worry about how are they going to get to state and stuff like that if they qualify.
So like using the FFA example, how does that come about? Like what's the timeline, and who decides that, and who proposes that, and where does it come from? Like, is it from do the principals at some point
It's typically an interest-based thing.
Something like that, the high school, yeah, that was an interest-based from really the teacher and the principal, and actually maybe the community and kids to sort of get it going. On
But you know that like a year, like that was proposed a year ago and then you
Yeah,
kinda
for
put
sure.
it into the
On
budget
that one,
last year? Is
yeah.
that- Okay.
Or well, it's been there.
Well, Timberlake's, it started,
Couple
this
years
is
ago.
its 5th year,
Okay.
And some of
at
that.
Timberlake.
Yeah.
And
And
this
then
is
Lakeland
the
is
first year at Lakeland.
High.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so Timberlake, and it was, you know, sort of proposed, and I don't know what Jackie was doing before that. Part of it was, I don't think she's been with us for more than 5 years.
Mhm.
So Jackie Duran up at Timberlake, who does FFA, I mean, she had I think that's her passion.
Uh-huh.
And she was teaching
Big
other
time,
subjects.
yeah.
Yeah.
And finally she
She
said,
was even doing drama at one point. I know
right.
that, yeah.
And so she said, you know,
Why aren't we
and,
doing this? What if we did this?
and said, you know, I think as an elective this could be really strong, and we have room in the master schedule,
And she had the interest, you know, she had
The interest
had
and
had
stuff.
enough kids up there that were,
Mhm.
yeah, they were on
a lot of
board.
times
and
if you do an
she-
elective, like if you say, yeah, we want as a teacher,
I wanna teach this.
I want to teach French, and well, if nobody wants to learn French, you know,
Mhm.
they may have to say, no, we can't do that because we can't have you a class of 4 people.
Like with the FFA thing, that has been super interesting. My daughter was in the Timberlake one, so I kind of watched that evolve into something. So they started with a few kids. Jackie started talking to some kids and seeing who would be interested. They all were on board. They wanted to do it. But with FFA, it's not only an extracurricular activity. You actually have to provide the agricultural related classes, because to be an FFA member, you have to be in an ag related class as well. So you have to have, you know, the staffing to make sure that, you know, those classes are offered, and then you have enough kids to fill those classes. So that one has been a little bit different.
Bigger one.
Yeah.
Well,
That
that's
is
a little
a-
bigger, and that does fall into,
Mhm.
I mean, some of those programs, like agricultural ed is, you know, just like, and we don't have, I don't think we have it at Lakeland High, just like marketing ed is, so ag ed is the academic program, or the career technical program, however you want to say it. And as part of that program, they have FFA as a student leadership group.
Right. Mhm.
So you have marketing education, and I know they have a real strong program like at Coeur d'Alene High School. And the student group is DECA,
Yeah.
the
Right.
distributive education. They have never changed the DECA club name to MECA, to marketing ed, because anyway, that's part of the same sort of idea, is that if you're going to have a DECA club, they have to have the marketing ed classes to
Mhm.
dovetail.
So like we just couldn't start DECA here because we don't have the coursework at the high school. Like you have to have. Like,
Correct. So we'd have to have a
So
right.
you have
We'd
to
have
hire the teachers.
hire
you
a
have to have
teacher.
the money, and then that's where that.
and
comes
then
in.
and then the
Yeah.
kids
Okay.
sort of start the club, right? So that'd be sort of the same process, right?
Mhm.
And it just hasn't been something that's been here. It could, you know, if someone really wanted to do it, and eventually you might have to give up another elective because you got so many kids, so many periods of the day. You have to see how is this going to fit in, or do I need another elective to fill out my schedule and at work? You know, that there's some of that you at the secondary level, when you're adding classes, you do have to sort of look at how it impacts other classes.
Because it can be a ripple effect.
It could be a ripple effect, but otherwise, you know, but also maintaining programs would be like for us when we decide to do all day K. That's really not. We want to make sure that once we did it, and if we had the levy support to do it, that okay, we can't go backwards. We couldn't. Let's say we had that and we had state budget cuts, and we didn't increase our levy. We could not cut. Once we started that, that's something something you can't go back on. We would have to figure something else out.
Yeah. So then you have to
You know what I
move
mean.
money around.
Well,
You might have,
Pull from
yeah,
somewhere else.
you might have pulled from, so maybe something else has to go. But really, that's the hardest thing, is you really want to. Since we pulled out of the recession several years ago, and the state started putting a little bit more money and our levy increased, the one thing we've been trying to do is grow smart. So if you go, you know, schools are funny, and maybe cities are the same way. you know, it's like turning an aircraft carrier. You know, the boat will turn, but sometimes it just doesn't turn on a dime. And so, you know, as you move forward and try to make improvements, a lot of times it's sort of slow, steady progress. And because if you move too fast, you know, sometimes you don't build things that are sustainable. And so a lot of times you do want to sort of just
Build a good
and-
foundation.
Good
to
foundation.
start
And it's
from.
hard because, you know, teachers and, you know, and superintendents,
Yeah,
they
go- they're
want
gung-ho.
they want to do it now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
We
And
want to
sometimes
provide the kids with all
and-
these opportunities, and which is awesome,
but sometimes there's only and there's so much level of change and move that an organization can sort of handle. But I think, at least I think we've done a pretty good job that once we've started stuff that we try to keep it
Mhm.
anyway.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's sort of, so the budget is sort of going to reflect that in a sense. Anyway, that's probably too long, guys.
Yep, okay.
I don't know if we wanted to meet again in May, I'll be sort of done, or what do you think? If the group wanted me, what I can do is when we have the budget, when I actually have the notification, I'll send everybody the notice. And then if anybody's interested on wanting to go over really nitty gritty details on where the money's here and how to compare to last year, I can do that, or how much you spend on this or that. I can get into, you know, harder details if people are interested in that. But otherwise, I don't know if we,
Yeah, cause otherwise then you're just looking at the overall that you would do in June,
Correct.
right? The
Yeah.
numbers that you just showed.
correct?
Mhm. Okay.
So it'd be sometime in, yeah, I mean, mid-May, we'll have to be getting pretty close to being done.
Yep.
Mid-May or the third week, cause I gotta start to notify the press.
Yeah.
I'll have to notify the press, you know, before Memorial Day.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.